Okay, part four of my commentary on discussion of the Magic Pill, the documentary, great documentary we're seeing, and it's a good launching pad for discussions on uh, the food we eat and how it's grown. Um, but I think I'm probably in this one stepping outside of, or at least delving more deeply into one aspect of this that I think the Magic Pill sort of alludes to, but doesn't uh, develop. And that is, in the last commentary, I talked about the difference between regenerative practices and agribusiness. That is, regenerative, you can look at that one, but regenerative practices regenerate the soil. Um, they're you just talk about permaculture, perennial polyculture, biodynamics, all of those kinds of practices that they're local, they regenerate the soil, they result in healthy food grown in healthy soil that sequesters carbon. There are and encourages and biodiversity. They're necessarily local because they can't be done on a grand scale. On the other side, we have agribusiness. That's generally a term, and I'm going to use it here to mean just to mean the opposite of that, and the current global system that is trying to go even more global, that is to control the entire food system uh, globally of the entire world, of the entire planet. Um, that's a good deal if you can get it. I mean, it's a good deal within a capitalist logic. And this is definitely all within the current capitalist logic of, I'm talking about agribusiness, maximizing profits, which means growing or producing whatever you're going to produce for the lowest possible cost and selling it for the highest possible price, and therefore maximizing your profits. And this is done. This is what agribusiness stands for, what it does. So what are the practices that do that? So now that we just have to understand what this system actually is. Um, and why anyone would want it. I mean, why would you want to eat this food is what I, no, so-called food. Why would you want to eat this so-called food? And why would you want to see your planet, your locality uh, degraded, um, uh, polluted, and so forth? Well, let's just see. So we've already kind of looked at this, but agribusiness uses it is it's the name for the matrix of practices, including big machines, big machinery, uh, uh, and this is how you grow grains, for instance. We'll just talk about grains for a second. How you can grow grains for the cheap in the cheapest way possible. Grains, in fact, this is why we're eating grains, is because they are cheap to grow, and it's because they can be industrially grown, and they're grown by using heavy machinery. In fact, this is out of the hands of small producers. This kind of growing, large machines, huge machines, big investments. In other words, pesticides, all kinds of biocides are necessary, and uh, artificial fertilizers. All of this is necessary because you've taken all of the animals off of the land. You've taken all of the biodiversity in plants out of the equation. You kill them because all you want is the grain. And if you do it at a large enough scale, this can become profitable. That is, you can get a lot of grains, and you can um, you can control for a while, not forever, but for a while, you can control fields as long as you have um, uh, artificial fertilizers, which means oil, uh, and biocides. Also, it means nitrogen that is extremely energy demanding. That is, it requires a lot of energy to create the nitrogen that they're putting in the soil. None of that would be necessary if we went back to practices whereby animals are also on the land because that is part of the recycling of, of nutrients. Well, we don't do that. We separate the nutrients out. They go to this, the nutrients go to the city, and where mostly they wind up in landfills. But even at that, the cities have not found a way to make proper compost. So this isn't a natural cycle. I do this to show a cycle that I'm trying to return to. There are the cycles are on the other side. They're on the regenerative side. Agribusiness about separating things to make it easier to produce mass crops, mass produce a product. And the product here we're talking about is grains. By the way, a lot of this discussion winds up like the magic pill, as in the magic pill, separating out uh, all of the uses of those grains. So we have grains and oil seeds. Just go and look at investment advice and listen to people who, the experts on the market, telling you where to place your money and all that, talking about, and they will analyze uh, grains and oil seeds for fuel, cotton seeds, for clothing. So we got fiber, fuel, and food, and they go in three different directions. So when people talk about, deforestation and the problem that deforestation is causing for, deforestation in favor of cattle ranching, deforestation, the most of deforestation is going on for agri-fuels, and that's a political issue. That the states are required to support the deforestation and the growing of grains for corn, especially for ethanol. So don't forget that that's a key factor in this. It's not simply food we're talking about here. From an environmental perspective, it's grains and oil seeds for biofuels and for fibers. That's cotton. You have whole countries like Uzbekistan, uh, you know, uh, socially and environmentally destroyed, uh, deteriorating, and close to slave labor. Uh, that is required. Everyone is required to work in the cotton fields, highly polluting and destructive of the water system, water infiltration and retention, and the water supply. So, I mean, so there are different, we're talking about much more than simply food. However, for the moment, I'm just going to talk about, we're just doing food here. Try to not spend too long on this. My point is that what the agricultural aspect, the agribusiness uh, uh, part of this food industry did was created products for as little as possible. Now, that's the grains aspect of it. Even in the fruit and vegetable sections, that's where they just can't grow fruits and vegetables in the same way they can grow grains, not in the same mechanized ways, although there are mechanized, but generally they're using indentured or terribly exploited labor, usually not even indigenous labor. That is all this talk about, uh, Trump and uh, the wall and immigration policies and everything misses a really big issue, and that is for decades. America and the United States and Canada have been bringing in workers from Mexico and the Caribbean, sending them back after the harvesting season and treating them abysmally. Sometimes, I mean, this is well documented. Sometimes they're sent home with nothing after being exploited, and in pesticide laden um, fields of strawberries and lettuce and fruits and vegetables. So that's another aspect beyond the grains of agribusiness. Cheapest cheapest product possible. It's done It's done by exploiting labor. It's done by exploiting nature. It's done by separating livestock from the land. That is to have a cycle of an environmentally I hate that word sustainable. I just the way it's been used, but to have a, a, a system whereby nature's cycles are respected and carbon and nutrients are allowed to go back into the earth, back into the soil to enrich the soil that is then used to harvest foods for consumption, all kinds of foods, including those livestock or wild animals, whatever is actually on the land. We don't allow either on these crops. We don't allow either wild animals or livestock now. They're separated because we've broken this chain, this cycle of nutrients. Factory farms, all of the waste from that is separated from the fields where grains and fruits and vegetables and all these things are grown, and all edibles are grown. So-called food is grown. They should be together. That's how they should be together, and we never needed industrial artificial fertilizers, nitrogen and all the pesticides and all of the biocides when the systems were operating as natural systems that we evolved with. So instead of that, we've got ourselves into a logic of industrial capitalist agribusiness, and it's global now, and even where it's national, it's still using the same practices. Generally, it's still using the same. Well, agribusiness is using the same practices. I'm defining it as that. So here's the question. And then there's big food, by the way. Big food. You read a book like Swindled. British journalist wrote a great book on Swindled, where she manages to penetrate the food processing industry. The results are just stomach turning about how the chemical nature, the chemically processed food, so-called foods. I mean, you can't even call this food anymore. The substances that are then produced for, mass consumption. And now that mass consumption is all over the world, right? Now, so the mass production, so food, agriculture, agribusiness, agri-food, to create a product as cheaply as possible. That means mass produced with as little intervention as possible from nature. Imposing our will on nature can't happen for very long, and that's very clear now. Imposing a capitalist logic on nature and on humans as well, and sadly on all of the rest of the planet. I mean, on all of the non-human life on Earth, in the biosphere. That leads. Why would you want to eat that food? Is my first question. Why would we want to eat that food? Why do we subject? Why is food? We all need food. I mean, we're not breatharians. We need food. Breatharians is this thing where some people believe humans don't need to eat food at all. We just breathe the air. I don't think many of those people live long enough to develop this theory. Now, why? Since food is a necessity, we'll just take that as a given. Why is it subject to the market? Why do we do that? And is it necessary? It shouldn't be. That's my first claim. First of all, if you actually do research in any one of these areas, there was factory farming, agribusiness, big food. the results are so unappetizing, so disgusting that you wouldn't you couldn't really support it ethically, morally, and I don't even know what kind of what kind of gymnastics you have to do, to in order to be able to even eat this stuff. That's why I call it so-called food. Michael Pollan calls it food-like substances. Some people have taken to calling it fake food. Um, the magic pill uh, has its own. They have a really good take on that, where an Aboriginal Australian woman talks about in her language how there is a word for non-edible non-edible plants, and those are the one, and the word is, I don't know what the word is. I couldn't pronounce it, but it's these things are not to be eaten. But in fact, that's what exists mostly in grocery stores. I mean, in the big grocery stores, agri-food, chemically processed food, industrially processed food, which I'm going to call so-called food. You could call it agri-food, maybe. Uh, Maybe there's a better term for it. Okay, so what if it's not? And is there any way out of it? Let's just take Canada, and here this is not going to be at all a nationalist argument, because then you'll see in a minute why. I'm here in Montreal, but Canada has had for a long time, all prime ministers, whether they're liberal or conservative, have had to support something called supply management, and that is in certain fields, in certain areas like dairy, Canada assures the supply side. That is, it makes sure that Canadian needs are furnished by protecting that field, that market. So, it does it with tariffs and things like this, which is a great idea. This is to say, now, inside of that, and this is why I'm not becoming nationalist about this, inside of that logic of supply management, practices can be just as bad as anywhere else. I mean, these aren't regenerative practices. They could be, but they're not. But I am trying to point out that this supply management, which is under attack right now, uh, from a trade perspective, these trade arguments, free trade arguments, are about uh, allowing industry agribusiness to create the lowest possible priced commodity, lowest priced commodity possible. The lowest cost products at the lowest commodities at the lowest cost. And that means if you can whatever you can produce, uh, and just ignore all of the huge subsidies that exist in the United States in many different ways for agriculture, for corn and all of the oil seeds and the grains. Those are highly subsidized. I mean, something like $40 billion a year. I mean, it's huge subsidies in Canada as well. But these are all countries could do this, but they could also do it within a regenerative framework. That is, what I'm trying to say is we already have demonstrated that a country like Canada is willing to interfere with the market in order to protect its local population. Local here is in a big sense because Canada is a big country, right? And the practices that supply management is supporting are not at all regenerative. But I'm saying they could be. We are already interfering with the capitalist logic of the market, which is destructive to the planet, which is destructive to our health, and there I defer to the magic pill and many other sources that show that the foods we're eating are at the base of our degenerating health, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and so forth. So this is my main claim here, and the thing that I'm working out is that um, you have two different options here. One of them is continuation with agribusiness and big food. That means the worst product, that is no concern with the product except that it be the cheapest. and that you can sell it. But of course, if it's the thing that if it's a thing that people can buy, and for many other reasons, it's a thing that that is available to them through the support of government, through state food guidelines that we can see are uh, uh, unfounded, unscientific, not based in science, and detrimental to our health. Subsidies that force people, that force farmers into agribusiness. That is, there's no such thing in this agribusiness as a family farm anymore. You are forced into accepting the what agribusiness offers you, and because that is what who is going to buy your product, and that is your agricultural product. And if you want to have your agricultural product bought and then transformed by big food, you have to sell it to agribusiness. And here we're talking about Monsanto, Cargill, ADM, Syngenta, all, and there's a whole raft of practices involved here: seeds, chemicals, farm machinery, um, fertilizers, all of those things. That's a big complex, and that's agribusiness. So, and on the other side, so that's one thing. That is the where that is what our governments support. That's what our states support generally, and that is giving us the worst possible product, the worst product for the health of our environment, of our ecosystems. Uh, the worst thing for continuing global warming, uh, the disruption of the carbon cycle that should be allowing nutrients to go back in the soil. We've all been through all that in the other commentaries. So that's on one side. That's capitalist, current capitalist agribusiness, using the efficient, market principles. Cheapest thing, produce low, sell high. On the other side, now if we take, as Canada takes one little step towards with supply management system that is protecting the producers of, for instance, dairy, it does it in a few areas, then we can see why not support regenerative practices. And that can be done at local levels, and at national, and then local levels all over the world. And it has to be done all over the world if it's going to be done anywhere. This means take agriculture out of the market. Um, don't forget, evidence is that Canada's doing it a little bit. Now change the practices and have subsidies, um, taxes, all all kinds of state support for um, uh, regenerative practices. That's an entirely different vision, and it changes the entire structure of the world in doing that. So it wouldn't be a simple thing. Well, it would be a simple thing actually, but it would revolutionize and upend uh, the way we eat food. Do it with subsidies. Do it, and now I'm going to talk about that in the next video. I want to do another commentary, something that the Magic Pill didn't talk about at all, but it's about where would these subsidies come from. Of course, don't forget now we have huge subsidies. I talk about how to finance this other vision that I have. A lot of people have it, and anyone I think who is conscious of the um, so-called food that's being offered in through these through uh, industrial food system, that is the grocery stores and the industrially processed food, chemically processed food that's being offered to you. I don't see how anyone would not opt for real local food grown in healthy soil, uh, uh, animal products, having lived healthy lives in in biologically appropriate conditions. Okay, next time, how do you do that? Easy.